Very good evening, Jayesh, Varma. Once again, welcome you all to this edition of Value Talks, where we'll be discussing the importance of and nuances of statutory and non-statutory complaints. Ladies and gentlemen, on 2nd August, we have already carried out one webinar with our panelist who's present today, Advocate Govind Bali, regarding how to approach AFT, what all are the timelines, what all are the procedures by which you can approach AFT for varied issues while you're serving. So one of the most important facet which we've discussed that day is exploiting all the remedial measures available at your hand before approaching AFT. Now, in case of service personnel, it is imperative for them to, exercise these remedies known as non-statutory complaints and statutory complaints for any grievance which they want to, approach AFT for. So to discuss that in detail, what are non-statutory and statutory complaints and how one should take up as Govind Bali. Govind Bali, as you all must be aware now, it is his third, almost fourth webinar. He's one of the well-known advocates and he's been awarded with Nations Icon Award in 2022 as well as Icon of Asia Award in 2022. He is founder partner of Fast Track Legal Solutions and has played, important role in some huge cases like Article 370 and NRC. So, Govind sir, welcome once again.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for having me here.
जी, so गोविंद सर, हमने उस दिन भी जब हम AFT के प्रोसीजर्स के बारे में जान रहे थे, तब भी हमने इस विषय को थोड़ा सा टच किया था, लेकिन आज का हमारा ये स्पेशल वेबिनार सिर्फ और सिर्फ इसी विषय पर रहेगा. Ladies and gentlemen, those who will be watching the repeat telecast of this webinar on YouTube, you are requested to join our Telegram and WhatsApp channels through which you can get connected to our panelists or our experts for one-on-one redressal. However, those who are present today on this webinar, they will obviously be given chance to ask their questions at the end of the webinar. So, Govind sir, शुरू करते हैं. Statutory और non-statutory complaints. पहले तो दोनों में फर्क और दोनों की इंपॉर्टेंस आप ये बताएं प्लीज हमारे दर्शकों को.
सर बेसिकली जो जब लॉ की बात करी जाती है, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट लॉ, द लिटरेरी मीनिंग इटसेल्फ डिफरेंशिएट्स द बोथ. जब हम पढ़ते हैं या सुनते हैं, नॉन स्टैट्यूटरी मीन्स समथिंग व्हिच इज नॉट इन द स्टैट्यूट, whereas statutory means something which is followed by the statute itself. So non-statutory means a complaint which is not under the Army Act, which has not been mentioned in the Army Act and is running on Army orders or internal orders of an organization. Similarly, there could be a non-stat or a ROG inside the organization when it comes to Air Force or Navy. Now, when it comes to statutory complaint is a complaint which is actually under Section 26 and 27 of the Army Act. Now, Section 26 clearly mentions when anybody other than an officer files a complaint. That means it is only for other ranks, junior commissioned officers and NCOs. Whereas in case of officers, Section 27 gives you the right to file a statutory complaint. Now, importance की जब तक बात करी जाती है, sir, there are a lot of administrative issues inside the organization also, which generally cannot go to the courts because courts are already overburdened. So for that, the idea of statutory and non-statutory complaints came into existence. When we talk about the military law at large, military law is more about the ethos of the organization. Ethos of the organization and how organizations work. So anything with respect to the welfare, rights, and jurisdictions fall under the ambit of statutory complaints. Whereas when it is talked about non-statutory complaints, as of now, non-statutory complaints are generally only open for CRs, that are confidential reports, या ACR जिसको हम कहते हैं. Therefore, generally non-statutory complaints are authorized in case of non-impanelment, in cases of any kind of reports that are written against you which you think are wrong and do not fall under your ambit. When we call about statutory complaints are also utilized against disciplinary matters, against minor penalties, severe punishments, which you think have to be given to the organization. Another major difference is that a statutory complaint goes to the ministry, whereas non-statutory complaints goes to the Chief of Army Staff. But in case of JCOs, ORs, and other people who are sepoys, the non-statutory complaints and statutory complaints can only go up to the Chief of Army Staff. So therefore, the adjudicating body differs in both the cases. In case of officers, a statutory complaint goes to the ministry, whereas in case of other ranks and JCOs, it goes to the Chief of Army Staff.
So my basic question, Bali sir, is when we talk about non-statutory complaint and statutory complaint, so is it mandatory for, let's say about officer, is it mandatory for him to go for non-statutory first and then statutory, firstly? And secondly, I understand that courts are overburdened, but then for the same reason, as we've discussed on 2nd of August, we have Armed Forces Tribunal. So why there are so many steps to, address your grievances? I mean, if Armed Forces Tribunal is already there, so, I mean, my sense is that there can be one body instituted, there can be one process laid down before approaching AFT, but then there are multiple, like non-statutory and statutory. So is it mandatory to go through non-stat and stat, or directly stat, or directly AFT?
So basically, there are not only two types of complaints. There are actually 5 to 6 types of complaints. First, I'll name them. One is non-statutory, one is statutory. Then there are journal complaints, which are again differentiated under various heads. There are journal complaints, there are signed complaints, there are pseudonymous complaints, then there are anonymous complaints. So basically, a journal complaint deals with a journal matter. For example, if there is some administrative issue that you're facing within the unit, and you're a youngster in the
it's
company.
kind of PIL, you can say.
No, not a PIL. There is no concept of PIL in administrative law.
Yes, I mean, in a way, where
I can't say that,
is,
sir,
because
PIL would be for the general good of public at large, whereas these complaints are specific to an individual. They cannot be filed in a group. For example, if you are aggrieved by a problem, you have to file your separate complaint under a separate name. It cannot be so that a group of 10 people file a single complaint in the army. So basically, everybody's complaint has to be taken care of in different manners. Other than a court of inquiry being conducted where all of the individuals are accused, in that case also, if they're aggrieved by the outcomes or if they're aggrieved by the procedure that has been followed by the CI and they want to file a complaint, each of the accused has to file a separate complaint. Now, one of the greatest examples of that is the case in which Lieutenant Colonel Purohit, after being taken into custody by the police, filed a statutory complaint that he has been wronged and there has been a violation under the Army Act. So now when we come to the idea that is it compulsory for an officer to file non-statutory complaint or a Jawan to file non-statutory complaint? So answer is simple, no. You can straight away go for a statutory complaint. But there are certain obligations for which you should always choose or sometimes choose a non-statutory complaint, because in non-statutory complaint, you get 3 chances to file the complaint. Whereas in a statutory complaint, you get only 1 chance. So for example, if you file a non-statutory complaint for the first time and you get a partial redressal, अब आप बोलोगे कि redressal क्या होता है? Partial redressal basically means कि अगर आपने 4 चीजें pray करी कि मैं यहाँ पे posted था, मेरे साथ ये हुआ, तो अब आप मेरी इसमें मदद करो and this should be taken off. So उसके अंदर आपका एक part हटा दिया गया और बाकी parts बच गए. तो उस केस के अंदर you can again file a non-stat for other removal of other parts with more evidences. But now the another thing is a non-stat cannot categorically filed for a document which you are aware of but you are not authorized to see. For example, आपको पता चल गया कि यहाँ पे एक ACR है जिसके अंदर you have been fixed, you've been given wrong marks or whatever. Now you are not authorized to see the complete ACR. You are only authorized to see certain parts of the ACR. So you cannot mention that particular document, that this document, this paragraph, it has happened, because legally you are not authorized to see that document. Similar is the case with statutory complaints also. Now, what needs to be proved in both the complaints is that there are circumstantial evidences which prove that you have been wronged by certain things. Now,
जी.
circumstantial evidences do not have a great evidentiary value as such, but
Mhm.
you cannot have direct evidences because the document that you are challenging or the order that you are challenging, you are generally not authorized to have access to that order. When
Correct.
you're not authorized to have access to that order, you will only have documents which are available to you, which will circumstantially prove that there has been some wrongdoing. So,
Correct.
another issue that differentiates statutory and non-statutory complaints is non-statutory complaints get resolved within the organization.
Yes.
Because बेसिकली हायर अप जो है, जैसे आपकी कंप्लेंट अगर सीओ के पास गई है, सीओ के अगेंस्ट में, तो सीओ से एक इमीडिएट रैंक ऊपर जो बंदा है वो आपका एडजुडिकेटिंग ऑफिसर बनेगा. He will point wise raise contentions. Matlab, he has to give a point wise observation about the complaint you have filed. Then it would go to the adjudicating officer at the at the army headquarters. Ab iske
जी.
andar bhi there is a difference. Now, when we talk about stat complaints, there are two kinds of non-stat complaints basically.
Okay.
First is which goes against the MS branch, and second is
Mhm.
which goes against the AG's branch. तो दोनों के
Mhm.
अंदर एडजुडिकेशन डिफरेंशिएट हो जाती है.
जी.
बेसिकली जो डिफरेंशिएशन है कंप्लेंट्स का, दैट इज आल्सो अंडर व्हिच ब्रांच इट फॉल्स. ए ब्रांच की अगर कंप्लेंट है, देन इट हैज टू बी एड्रेस्ड टू द एजी. This is
जी.
about kernel complaint that I'm talking. Whereas if it is against the MS, it has to be addressed to the MS. Whereas in case of statutory complaints, it has to be addressed only to the ministry. But in statutory complaints, you cannot again and again write a reminder that what has happened to my complaint directly to the ministry. You can
जी.
write to CO, then again the whole chain of command has to be followed, and then it comes in. But if in the given stipulated period of time you do not get a redressal, then you can directly write to the ministry for it.
Understood. Understood. So, if I've understood you correctly, statutory complaints and non-statutory complaints, anybody, whether he's a Jawan or an officer, he can either go for non-stat complaint or he can directly go to statutory complaint. Now, as we've discussed that these are the modes by which we can keep the issue in-house in the organization. But somehow, let me tell you this, a differentiating view actually. Isn't it that you are giving them, lot of time, lot of chance, and lot of opportunities for them to prepare a case against you? Because see, when I'm doing a statutory complaint for X issue, and let's say if the institution wants to derail it, if the institution want to go against me, so they can keep derailing it time wise also, and they can keep producing different evidences. They can keep, for that matter, erasing the evidences which are there, which are concrete in my case. So let's say if there is some case which has got, national implications or security implications, which, a particular officer finds some wrongdoing in that. So is it wise for him to go through this channel, or he can directly approach the higher authorities and the judicial bodies?
Sir, basically speaking, if it is a disciplinary matter or it is with respect to the ideas, ethos interested in the organization, then one should file a statutory complaint.
Okay.
Now, why that should be done, though it is not written in the Army Act that the disposal of a statutory complaint has to be reasoned that why it is dismissed. But in various cases, I'm not talking about one case, there are philanthropy cases in which the organization has been told by the courts, and even the Ministry of Defense has been told by the courts, that it is injustice if you do not give a reasoned order. Because if injustice has happened, it has to be proved. Now that injustice has to be proved, so it has to be a reasoned order. That is why there is a point-wise comment section when the statutory complaint goes. It is
Mhm.
another thing that comes in is, sir, that for example, you're a company commander.
Ji.
Your complaint is against the CO. The
Mhm.
CO does not have a right to write on that complaint. That
Correct.
would straight away go to the brigade commander.
Ji.
And the brigade commander becomes the immediate up dealing with the authority, and he will be giving the point-wise reports. And
Ji.
sir, what I understand is it is easy to criticize the organization at various occasions. But
Ji.
we all understand that trust has to be entrusted in the judicial system. Even if you do not get the redressal through the statutory complaint, you move to AFT. If the AFT's decision you're not satisfied with, you go to the Supreme Court. So in the end, your ends of justice are not closed. You are always open with the ends of justice. Though it is pretty true that sometimes the end of justice become bit slow, but that
Ji.
does not mean that justice will not prevail. It would take certain time, but it would happen. Now, when you talk about the timeline, sir, once you have filed the complaint, it would be only 20 days that the regiment that you are in should take to forward the complaint to the next higher ups. Now that the next higher ups becomes either the sub area or the brigade commander. So they
Ji.
can also take another 20 days. Sir. Now, after that, the division of the area, basically, for example, if you're in a sub area and that has to certainly fall under some division or
Ji.
some higher up, that higher up can take up to 25 days to 30 days. Sir. The
Ji.
core headquarters has to take only 30 days to process it, and the command headquarters take 40 days to process it. So in total, it is around a period of 130 days in which it has to be adjudicated. Now, when it basically goes to the headquarters where such investigation is taking place for the whole complaint procedure, another 40 days are given to that. That means in the end, in a total time of 180 days, it has to be completed. 180
Understood.
plus minus 10, 20 days. So which means
Understood.
it's a time-bound disposal mechanism. Though looking at the number of complaints coming in, it might be delayed a bit. But if it is delayed, you have the right to ascertain whether the complaint has been looked at or it has not been looked at, whether there is a reply which has been given to it, whether it is under process or not. Now,
Understood.
basically, what happens, sir, that whenever a complaint is filed, in case of non-statutory complaints, there are certain number of sets that have to be given at various occasions.
Mhm.
Similarly, in case of AG matters, you have to give one copy to the concerned unit in case of officers. In care, then one copy to the brigade headquarters. Then there has to be advance copy which has to be given. Then the army headquarters, if that TV4 has to be given two copies. Then another additional copy has to be given to the command headquarters. And then one copy has to be given to the MS office, basically where MS branch is situated. So basically, generally, the duty of the person who is your immediate senior is to look at whether the complaint is in proper format. Because there are certain guidelines to file a complaint also. You
Mhm.
cannot go all out abusing the person you have been dealing with. You have
Mhm.
to be courteous in the complaint. You have to
Understood.
uphold the ideas and ethos of the organization so that the
Mhm.
complaint that you make is well worded. It is not
Mhm.
abusive. It is not full of malicious comments, malicious words, so that you can actually represent the matter in a proper manner, in a channeled manner. Now,
Understood.
basically, in case of the stat complaints, there is a format which is given under section 26 and 27. There is a provision that comes out from the ministry, and the last provision that came in was in 2014. So
Ji.
that format followed. Whereas in case of non-statutory complaints, the formats are generally released by the MS branch or the AG's branch with respect to the complaints. Now, in those complaints also, there are certain things that need to be taken into consideration. First, you have to tell where did the occasion happen, what happened, how did it happen, and why are you aggrieved, and what is the aggravation that is actually harming you. So, similar is with the statutory complaints also. Now another question that comes in कि क्या होगा कि अगर statutory complaint में आपको redressal मिल गया या start complaint में अगर आपको redressal मिल गया और वो किसी disciplinary matter पे था तो उसके ऊपर court of inquiry करनी पड़ेगी आदमी को.
Ji.
कोर्ट ऑफ इंक्वायरी होती है तो उसके अंदर इन्वेस्टिगेशन होगी. इन्वेस्टिगेशन के अंदर जो भी ऑर्डर्स आते हैं अगर आप उससे फिर भी एग्रीव्ड हो देन यू कैन अगेन मूव टू दी एएफटी. सो बेसिकली
Understood.
योर राइट्स आर प्रोटेक्टेड.
Understood. Understood. So, apart from promotional issues, apart from disciplinary issues, what all are the issues which files under the gambit of stats and non-stats?
सर नॉन स्टैट्स आर ओनली स्पेसिफिक टू सीआरस. नॉन स्टैट्स
Non-stats are only specific to CRs.
as of now
Okay.
because I don't know if there is a new army order which has come in. Because as far as I have read in the past army orders, most of the non-stats, I would rather say all of the non-stats have been with respect to CRs and proportional matters.
Understood.
Whereas in case of disciplinary matters, statutory complaints are available. Now, statutory complaint can be filed for a sodomy case also. It can be
Understood.
filed for a case of harassment also. It can be filed for a case of wherein you are not being treated equally with the other men. It can be filed for a case of discrimination also. What it cannot be filed for is for the case of a posting,
Okay.
because postings do not cover under the ambit of Armed Forces Tribunal also.
Yes.
Postings are generally covered by the High Court. In rarest of the rare cases, they are not generally accepted also. Because
Okay.
when we talk about the constitutional provisions, only right to life is available to you.
Yes.
So other all rights are suspended till the time you are
Because
in
we
the
have taken an oath, कि
service.
कहाँ, yes, we have taken an oath to serve anywhere, whether it is land, sea, or air. But nonetheless, we have understood the importance of stats and non-stats. So, as you've already said, that non-stats are generally, used in case of promotions and CRs. That is what Kripa Shankar is asking, that whether he should file statutory complaint or non-statutory complaint if he's got some observations on CR. I hope you get your answer, Kripa. You can lower your hand. We will also give you a chance in short while to ask your question one-on-one. So my basic question, what are the issues which are not covered at all in non-stat and stat? That is my last question I'll ask you, for which one needs to directly either approach AFT or High Court.
Sir,
Is there any issue?
the ambit of AFT is not really closed.
Hmm.
I mean, even if you go there directly, the only thing is your petition would get rejected until unless you have a specific reason to contemporarily prove that there would be a bias if you would have gone to the organization. Now, the issue that comes in is that bias is very difficult to prove, sir,
Yes.
because bias is something which has to be proved categorically. Similarly, when we talk about stats and non-stats, there are cases wherein there are minor alterations between two individuals. Now,
Mhm.
another recent thing comes in. For example, you are my CO. I've got a complaint against you, and I raise a complaint. When it goes to the brigade commander, it is the duty. He is duty bound under the army orders / the act to interview me. He has to
Mhm.
interview me about the problem and then take necessary actions. So
Mhm.
basically, that is why you must have heard that there are a lot of anonymous complaints going in if the CO of the unit is not able to comply with the basic law and orders, basic welfare of the units. Now
Mhm.
that do not fall under statutory complaints. Neither do they fall under the ambit of non-statutory complaints.
Hmm.
They can come into the ambit of non-pseudonymous, anonymous, or signed complaints. Now, when we talk about anonymous complaints, the procedure is a bit different. For
Mhm.
example, a person files an anonymous complaint to the brigade commander with a copy to GOC that
Mhm.
so and so is happening in my unit and I need some evolution to happen. Now, what will happen is rather than straight away working on the complaint, you first have to find the person who's filed it.
Okay.
So, because when you find that person will be able to ascertain the fact that what is the problem that is actually facing. Now,
Mhm.
when you know what the problem is, you can assess it in a proper manner and you can actually give a proper answer to that, and then the problem is resolved. Now, what would happen, sir? For example, there is some personal enmity between you and me. I
Mhm.
would end up filing a stat complaint against you, or I
Mhm.
would end up filing a non-stat, anonymous complaint against you, or a signed complaint against you. Now, the law says that if the claims are found to be bogus, in that
Mhm.
case, you will be penalized.
Correct.
So, if your complaint is bogus in nature and you do not have proper proofs to substantiate the case in that matter, you would fail terribly.
Mhm.
Because, again, the idea of ethos and the organizational structure comes in. Because one needs to understand when we file a complaint against an individual, it makes everything on the person to prove that something wrong has happened to him. Because
Correct.
in India we follow the adversarial system of law. Now
Mhm.
in adversarial system, it is on the complainant to prove that the other person is guilty without beyond reasonable doubt.
बट
So
लेकिन बाली सर, आपको भी पता होगा कि फौज इतनी क्लोज नेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जहां पर आपका साथ कोई नहीं देगा। जैसे ही आप कंप्लेन कोई करोगे, लेस से अगर आपने आम भलाई में भी की, तो जिनकी भलाई के लिए आप वो कंप्लेन करोगे वो भी आपके साथ खड़े नहीं होंगे। सो ऐसे सिचुएशन में क्या करें फिर? कंप्लेन करें या ना करें?
sir,
बिकॉज समथिंग रॉन्ग इज ऑब्वियसली हैपनिंग। You are
Well,
witnessing
see,
it.
one needs
You are
to be
witnessing
very
it.
strong about it. I'll be very honest. I have seen a lot of non-stats in my life, sir,
Mhm.
since my very childhood, because I have seen how they go on and what the procedure is. There are certain wrongs which happen due to the, miscommunication or the gaps of communication between a senior officer and a junior officer. And
Okay.
generally, you would see the ACRs are generally mixed up or basically destroyed, or wrong markings are given at early stages of service, because at that time the what do you say, at the very younger side of the service, the officer is more in Josh, sir. He does not understand the maturity of the
Well,
organization.
ask me. I've paid a lot of I've lost a lot of things because of that Josh. So yes, you're right.
And
Um,
now the
yes.
idea on that also is, sir, when it comes to CRs, your initial service report is not considered in promotional boards.
Mhm.
So मतलब first 3 to 4 years की जो service reports होती हैं, they are not considered. So even if they are fixed, they cannot be considered in the service
Well, in
record
case
for.
of SS, the game completely changes over here because now you're talking about promotions, but for SS officers, short service commission officers, their first battle is to get PC. And even one bad ACR, you do not get PC. That is for sure. So for short service commission officer, each and every ACR counts. Sorry.
Certainly, yeah. So that is what needs to be taken into consideration. If
Mhm.
you realize that there is certain kind of bias that is being running against you, you should fight it off. It is better to die after fighting rather than just submitting to it and saying that I
Correct.
have lost.
Understood.
So
Now,
I always say, sir, to a lot of people who come up, sir, this is the issue coming up. What should I do? And they say, I do not want to do it because I might get a bad name in the company I'm working in the organization I'm working in. So I always state that no battle is won without fighting it, sir. So
correct.
one has to fight a battle to do it, sir. Now,
वेल,
whether
आप
it
वकील हो सर, आप वकील हो, आप तो बोलोगे ही फाइट करने के लिए, लेकिन उसके पीछे की जद्दोजहद, जितने जूते रगड़ने पड़ते हैं, जितना समय जाता है और जितना पैसा खर्च होता है, वो चीज को देखकर लोग रुक जाते हैं. अदरवाइज एवरीबडी वांट्स टू फाइट. सो कमिंग टू माय लास्ट क्वेश्चन सर, वो ऑफिसर्स जिन्होंने कुछ who got some experience, bad experience, or they were not able to represent it while in service, but they still want to get some justice or some remedy after retirement. So does the stat and non-stat has got any role in that?
certainly, sir, certainly.
Hmm.
Now, basically, even after retirement, you can file a stat complaint. But
Okay.
that stat complaint has to have the reason why did you not file it during the service? Why did the delay take place? And
Hmm.
what is the remedy that you're going to get out of it? So basically, it is again the same channel has to be followed. But now that you're retired, your
Hmm.
next higher up generally becomes the person in the army headquarters to whom you will write. So
Hmm.
basically, would personals branch में जाएगा in case of ORs, and in case of officers, it would go to the MS branch, and then it would be forwarded to the AG's branch, and then it would take place of the same procedure. Now, again, the differentiation that comes in whether it is a AG's complaint or a MS complaint. Now,
Okay.
when that comes in, sir, basically, the DO letters we have, they are also some form of complaints only at times, because when a DO letter is written, a reply ought to be given on it.
Hmm.
So a DO letter can itself not be given back without a reply. So
Hmm.
what one needs to understand is, sir, every issue has got a gravity on it. So,
Correct.
for example, if it is a case of sodomy, you should not straight away go for a statutory complaint,
Okay.
because you can get the justice out well in the unit itself. Because a
Okay.
CI can be conducted and other things can be conducted.
Hmm.
For example, sir, I'll tell you in the army language only. When somebody
Hmm.
can be killed with the insas, why use the MMG?
Correct.
So basically, you need to understand when to use which weapons.
Correct.
Whereas when it comes to CRs or promotional matters, it is, according to me, very well and very good to utilize non-stats first,
Okay.
because you get 3 chances with it, and उसके बाद एक fourth chance आपको stat का मिल जाता है. Whereas if you straight away go for a stat complaint, you cannot again file a non-stat complaint.
Correct. Yes.
Another
And then you
question
have.
in
Mhm.
case of stat complaints, If the issue changes or the facts and circumstances changes, then a fresh stat can be filed. But a similar stat cannot be filed for the similar issue, sir. Now,
Understood.
another thing is, सर, जो हम बात कर रहे थे कि अगर उन्होंने आपका माना नहीं और उन्होंने आपके अगेंस्ट में ऑर्डर्स दे दिए, तो उसके ऊपर सर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बार बार कहा है रीजनड ऑर्डर्स के बारे में. अब बेसिकली हमें ये समझना पड़ेगा कि जो मिलिट्री लॉ है, इट इज फॉर्म ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लॉ, सर. It is not specifically something like a criminal law thing, because it is basically talking about the administration of an organization which is military in nature. So that is why जब हम बात करते हैं सर जो statutory complaints की या non-statutory complaints की, CO is at par to MM, sir. That is a magistrate. That is why they have got the powers to conduct a summary trial.
Correct.
It clearly means if any offense which falls under the definition of summary trial or a GCM also, SCM also, क्योंकि Navy और Air Force में SCMs नहीं है. There are very few organizations like Army, BSF and ITBP. We have got SCMs there जहाँ पे summarily चीजें try हो जाती हैं. Any kind of assault, disharmony between soldiers, anything which is undoing with the military, character and charter, वो सब तो समझ ट्राई हो ही जाएगा सर. स्टैट्यूटरी कंप्लेंट्स बेसिकली इसलिए लाई गई कि जो एएफटी में टाइम लगता है, बेसिकली एएफटी में कई बार लिस्टिंग में ही टाइम लग जाता है.
जी जी.
वंस फाइल अ कंप्लेंट, जैसे अभी कल आपने ओए फाइल करी, तो जरूरी नहीं है कि वो नेक्स्ट वीक लिस्ट ही हो जाएगी.
जी.
उसकी लिस्टिंग को क्या पता 1 हफ्ता लग जाए, 2 हफ्ते लग जाए, 3 हफ्ते लग जाए. इसीलिए स्टैट्यूटरी कंप्लेंट्स का एक मैकेनिज्म लाया गया कि जुडिशरी के जाने से पहले अगर कुछ रिजॉल्व हो सकता है तो उसको पहले ही रिजॉल्व करके, एमिकेबली रिजॉल्व करके उसका सोल्यूशन दे दिया जाए. एंड जो बहुत ज्यादा एग्रीवेटेड मैटर्स हैं उनको एएफटी ले जाया जाए. अब उसके बाद क्या होता है सर कि जो कंप्लेंट्स है ना, उनको डिस्पोज करना भी एक बहुत बड़ा इशू है. आप बेसिकली आप ये नहीं लिख सकते, जैसे मान लो आप मेरे इमीडिएट सीनियर हो, आपके पास कंप्लेंट गई और आपने लिख दिया the case should be disposed on merits, full stop. Just writing that it should be disposed on merits does not decide the merits of the case, na sir? Then also the idea of a reasoned order comes in. Matlab, I have never seen Supreme Court giving such detailed judgments on reasoned orders other than this statutory complaints disposals. That is why I say that one should have a lot of faith in the judiciary, because I have seen that in case of army, when the organization is not serve you the purpose, courts serve you the purpose, because courts have got a better understanding of the principles of law.
जी.
To understand that people in the army, the officers in the army, even JAG officers in the army are trained as per the rules and regulations specific to the army. So their decision making is also restricted to that form of thinking at the time. They are not judges at large. Whereas people sitting as judges, इसलिए आपने देखा होगा सर, कोई भी ट्राइब्यूनल भी होगा ना, उसमें एक जुडिशियल मेंबर होगा और एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव मेंबर होगा, so that the balance can be maintained. Because the administrative angle of a complaint might be a lot different than the judicial angle of it. For example, there is a principle of natural justice. In case of certain offences in the army, you are court-martialed, and then you go back to the AFT and you basically go against that order, and the AFT reinstates you, stating that the punishment was too harsh for the offense committed. There, in the principle of natural justice comes in. Now people have also started adding to the same policy in the army also. Basically, if a person is, for example, a captain sir, and he has to be marshal, then rather than court-martialing him on the rank of a captain, they reduce him in rank and he automatically goes on. So in that case, the courts also, you were given the deduction in rank, therefore the principle of natural justice has played in. Therefore, there is no need to actually do something against it. So basically, the principles of law differentiate, sir. Now, when it comes to other things, sir, for example, commands of a regiment, if there is any discrimination coming in that case also you can take interviews of the colonel of the regiment, the lieutenant general साहब जो deputy chief होते हैं, because he is the one who's going to deal with them. Because certainly the person immediate junior to you might be belonging to someone very close in the hierarchy, who might have retired long back. Okay? But in that case also, that does not mean that the principle of equality would be faded out. Principle of equity will stay in, sir, because merit is what Any public service has to come in.
जी
Similarly, sir, when we talk about merit, merit has to be the first priority. That is why if somebody is aggrieved by the merit, he says that this board result is the infused order which I want to challenge because it is not on merits.
जी
So
जी जी
that is what needs to be taken up. Now, another issue that comes up, sir, you said that short service officers are not allowed PC. There is
जी
a strange thing in the Navy, sir. If you are from the IT wing of the Navy,
जी
you can't even apply for permanent commission. So you can't even fill the form for permanent commission. Now,
See,
in that,
that is as per the laid down, instructions for that particular
for,
entry.
for,
So that's
now
perfectly.
for that entry, you cannot decide to file a ROG. For
जी
that, you would have to go to the court only, stating that this is not as per the principles of law and principles of equality and equity at
quality.
law. अब
Correct.
उसके बाद सर एक सर ने यहाँ पे क्वेश्चन पूछा है कि अगर आपकी एडजुडिकेशन है तो आप स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं या नॉन स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं if it is beyond the adjudication of AFT. So basically, AFT would have the adjudication of stats. It is not that the redressal given by the stats is not applicable in front of the AFT. AFT will talk about it, but obviously you can challenge it on a lot of grounds. First, that the reasoned order is not given. Because one needs to understand the person who's sitting in the ministry again is generally not an army officer. He's not served the organization and he does not know much about how the practical implications of the organization is. So you
जी
can again talk about a reasoned order. So basically, one needs to understand if circumstantial evidences are there, you can certainly get redressals in non-stats and stats. सिमिलरली अगर आपके अगेंस्ट में एक ऑर्डर पास करा गया है सीवियर डिस्प्लेजर का, तो सीवियर डिस्प्लेजर के लिए आप नॉन स्टार्ट फाइल नहीं कर सकते हैं
जी
बिकॉज सीवियर डिस्प्लेजर बेसिकली इज अ statutory provision. So for that, you would have to file a stat only.
अंडरस्टूड जी वैसे तो आपने ये चीज बार बार कही कि यू हैव टू ट्रस्ट ऑन द जुडिशियरी बट लेट मी टेल यू इन सर्विसेज बीइंग एन ऑफिसर एंड बीइंग इन दैट fraternity फॉर almost 10 years now that there is lot of lack of faith in judiciary as far as internal audits are concerned, as far as internal, you can say remedies are concerned. Then the next step comes to the same thing, that is AFTs and high courts. As I've already said, that there is a lot of process, there is a lot of time, and there is a lot of value which is associated with that. Therefore, generally people do hesitate to go on those lines. But nonetheless, it is imperative for each and every officer who's serving or retired about their rights, because if I can just give you my example, I was void of this information when I was in need, which now I am able to grasp. So इसीलिए शायद बाली सर फौज में ना ये लॉ वगैरह ज्यादा दिखाया नहीं जाता, ज्यादा सिखाया नहीं जाता, ना ही एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव चीजें ज्यादा बताई जाती है, वरना फिर कंप्लेंट्स बढ़ती जाएगी. Nonetheless, now
Well,
I
in the
will
end,
be opening the,
I would like to end by saying what the Supreme
yeah,
Court said in one of the cases.
जी
It said that reason is the heartbeat of every conclusion. Without a reason, it becomes lifeless. So,
understood.
इसीलिए we just have to strive for the reason, sir. And if there is a reason, you will get the solution. There are certain
Understood.
cases that take time, sir. And judiciary basically वही है सहज पके सो मीठा पाए. So,
अंडरस्टूड अंडरस्टूड बट देखिए, जो जैसे जिस केस में मेरा पर्सनल कोई एम नहीं है, जो कि आम भलाई के लिए किया गया हो, अगर कोई कंप्लेंट है, और जैसे कि आपने बताया, अगर आप चैनल से ही जाओगे तो आपको पहली चीज तो अंदर रेमेडी मिलेगी नहीं. फॉर आम भलाई के केस के लिए मैं बता रहा हूं आपको मेरा एक्सपीरियंस. मैं वो केस डिस्कस नहीं कर सकता, ये ओपन फोरम है, एंड इट इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड बिग केस which has got national implications. But let me tell you that I have seen, I mean, it's a personal experience that the complaints which we are talking about, I have got the, acknowledgement from, let's say, brigade commander, let's say, div commander, but then there are no acknowledgement. So institution was
I know
forcing me and poking me to,
for that case, one has to be clearly go forward with the other mechanisms at hand.
understood. But आप मुझे देखिए, अगर मेरा उसमें पर्सनल भलाई कुछ नहीं है तो मैं अपना समय क्यों इन्वेस्ट करूं? अब तो मैं रिटायर भी हो चुका हूं, तो मैं अपनी लाइफ देखूं, मैं अपनी जॉब देखूं, मैं अपने बच्चों को देखूं, फैमिली को देखूं, या आम भलाई के लिए काम करता रहूं. Nonetheless, it is imperative to fight against injustice and it is duty of us. one thing you can do, I mean, मैं जिस चीज से शांति से सो सकता हूँ कि भाई कोई गलत चीज थी, मैंने देखी, मैंने नोटिस की, मैंने उसको हाईलाइट किया और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को उसको बताया. So there I rested my soul, I can say, because
So in this, I'd like to add one thing, sir.
जी जी
When I was very small, I guess I was how old? I was in fifth or sixth class, I guess. But in mein the hum log, and there was
जी
some issue came in. So I asked my father that why did we took a stand against it?
हम्म
He said when I joined the army, I knew I have to serve the nation and I have to work for my troops. If the same is not done, my job is not done. So one has to
correct.
realize the principles on which they stand also. Sir.
जी
Because
जी
a principled man will always have peaceful sleep. Sir.
जी जी
So
जी
same goes for you also, sir. Hats off to you that you fought the case. You at least had the courage to write it off. And
जी
the evolution comes, sir. I always say that
I
Sati
understand,
Pratha
I
did not
understand.
go off in one day, sir. It
जी
took
जी जी
around 100 years to be abolished. Dhire
correct.
dhire Dowry would also get abolished. So any change takes time, sir.
Ji, I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you, Bali sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me request one and all over here that please do subscribe to our channel on Telegram as well as on YouTube. We also have WhatsApp group known as Value Talks Legal Aid. I have already put in the link in the chat box. Please do join the groups where you will get all the panelists available over there to whom you can chat, to whom you can ask for remedies or advices.
You gotta focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah.